welcome to FM Talks. So I want you to just picture this for a second, because I know you have been in this exact situation, maybe even today.
Oh, I'm sure they have. We all have.
Right. Okay, so it's like 4:30 p.m. on a random Tuesday. You're sitting at your desk, and you're just staring at a blank email window. You need to write a reply to a client, or maybe just a quick update to your team.
Something simple.
Exactly, something simple. 3 hours ago, writing this exact email would have taken you, maybe 2 minutes. You would have just rattled it off without a second thought. But right now, your cursor is just rhythmically blinking at you, and it feels almost mocking.
It really does.
Your eyes feel impossibly heavy, like someone draped a lead blanket over your forehead. And your mind feels like it's completely covered in television static. You try to reach into your brain for a coherent thought, and there's just nothing there to grasp.
It's absolute emptiness.
Yeah. So what do you naturally do? You abandon the email, you jump over to a new tab to check a social media notification, or you open a news site, just hoping to feel something. You're looking for a spark, right? A tiny hit of energy to wake you up.
And we know how that ends.
Fast forward 15 minutes, and you kind of blink and come back to reality. You're now staring at 24 open browser tabs. You haven't read any of them fully, and the email is still completely blank. And right on cue, that heavy wave of guilt washes over you. You tell yourself you're just being lazy, or you assume you just fundamentally lack self-control.
I am so glad we're starting the conversation right there, inside that incredibly frustrating 4:43 p.m. moment, because what you just described, that heavy, frozen, static-filled state, it is not a software bug in your character.
It's not.
No, it's really not. It's not a lack of willpower, it's not laziness, and it is certainly not a moral failing. You are experiencing a full-blown biological hardware crash. And that distinction is the massive, liberating core insight from the guide we're exploring today. The book frames this using a fascinating concept called metabolic insolvency.
Metabolic insolvency. Okay, that sounds intense. What does that actually mean for a busy Tuesday?
Well, to understand it, we have to look at the raw physical math of our bodies. Your brain makes up only about 2% of your total physical body weight. It's quite small. But every single day, just to maintain a baseline level of functioning, it demands a staggering 20% of your body's total energy supply.
Wait, 20% just for basic?
Just for baseline. It requires massive, continuous amounts of glucose and oxygen. It is by far the most metabolically expensive organ you possess. So when you push yourself relentlessly through a workday without honoring any kind of natural rhythm or flow, you don't just, lose focus in some abstract psychological way. You quite literally run out of physiological fuel. The tank is empty.
Wow. That completely reframes the entire experience, doesn't it? If you are sitting with us right now, maybe you're holding a warm cup of coffee, or you're stuck in traffic on your commute, or you're folding a mountain of laundry, I want you to just take a breath and let out a massive sigh of relief.
Truly.
You can actually let go of the guilt of being distracted or feeling completely drained. We're going to spend our time today having a calm, grounded chat about finding a better way to live. We're going to talk about how to gently work with your biology instead of constantly trying to white-knuckle your way against it. Because the moment you realize your brain isn't broken, it's just out of gas, it fundamentally changes how you treat yourself on messy Tuesday afternoon.
It changes your entire approach to your daily life. Because once you understand the fuel problem, you have to ask where all that fuel is actually going. To really understand why that 4:30 p.m. wall hits you with such physical force, the book explains that we need to look at the architecture of human attention.
Okay, lay it out for us.
We tend to think of our minds as this unified, rational democracy where all our thoughts are treated equally. But neurologically, that isn't true at all. The brain operates under a strict dual command structure. You're essentially governed by two very different commanders, and they operate on completely different biological budgets.
Two commanders. Got it.
Right. First, you have the commander the guide calls the wise mind. This lives in your prefrontal cortex, the area right behind your forehead. You can think of this as the CEO of your brain. The wise mind handles all of your deep logic, your strategic focus, your empathy, your long-term planning. It's the part of you that writes the thoughtful email or plans for the future.
So that's the part I'm trying to access at 4:30 p.m.
Exactly. But there is a massive catch. The CEO is incredibly expensive to keep on the payroll. It demands a state of absolute biological safety to function, and it burns through that glucose and oxygen at an astonishing rate.
It's like the CEO requires the penthouse suite, absolute silence, and a continuous stream of top-tier catering just to show up to the desk and do the work.
That is a brilliant way to picture it. But deep down in the biological basement of your brain, you have the second commander, the panic button. This is centered in your amygdala. It's your ancient evolutionary security guard. The panic button has one job and one job only: to scan the environment for threats. And it does this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without ever taking a break.
Sounds exhausting.
Well, here's the thing. Unlike the wise mind, the panic button is incredibly cheap to operate. It doesn't need top-tier catering. It runs on fumes. It doesn't care about your emails. It doesn't care about your career goals. And it certainly doesn't care if you're being polite. It only cares about keeping you physically alive.
So how does this lead to the crash?
Here is where the hardware crash happens. When you are stressed from back-to-back meetings, or you've been skipping meals, or you're just running on the ambient anxiety of modern life, your body eventually senses a severe fuel shortage. It registers this rapid depletion of energy as a state of famine or physical danger. And when that happens, the body doesn't just ask you nicely to take a break. It executes a dramatic physical hydraulic event called a vascular shunt.
Wait, hydraulic event, you mean actual physical plumbing in the brain?
Yes, quite literally.
Right.
When the panic button senses a threat like running out of metabolic fuel, it overrides the CEO. Blood, which is the physical carrier of the oxygen and glucose your brain needs to think, physically leaves the front of your brain.
It just drains out.
The vessels in your prefrontal cortex constrict, draining the fuel right out of the wise mind, and that blood rushes back to the primitive survival centers in your brainstem as well as to your major muscle groups. Your biology is preparing you to physically fight a predator or run for your life.
Oh my gosh.
So let's go back to that mental static you hear at 4:30 p.m. That foggy, blank feeling isn't you losing your discipline. It isn't a lack of focus. It is the audible physiological sound of your internal security guard, the panic button, operating completely alone in the dark because the wise mind has literally been locked out of the building.
I really need to pause and filter this, because this is the exact moment where the reality of being a busy, modern woman collides with this biology. When you understand this vascular shunt, you suddenly realize why trying to just push through brain fog is biologically impossible.
Exactly.
We all fall for the willpower fallacy. We sit there at the desk getting increasingly angry at ourselves, trying to force our brains to just be professional and write the email. But applying willpower to a brain that physically has no blood flow in its logic center is exactly like screaming at a car with an empty gas tank.
It's pointless.
You can press your foot on the gas pedal all you want. You can grip the steering wheel until your knuckles turn white. You can yell at the dashboard, but the car is not going to move forward. All you are doing by trying harder is burning out the starter motor.
The car analogy is flawless because the effort of trying harder when you are in the middle of a vascular shunt actually makes the situation worse. It generates more stress. Your panic button detects your rising frustration, your elevated heart rate, and your shallow breathing. It assumes the threat is escalating, that the predator is getting closer.
So it clamps down even more.
It clamps down even harder, ensuring that absolutely no blood returns to your wise mind. You trap yourself in a vicious, self-reinforcing loop of biological panic.
So practically speaking, if screaming at the car doesn't work, and if white-knuckling our way through the afternoon just terrifies our internal security guard even more, how do we gently get the gas back in the tank? How do we adjust this flow in the middle of a workday when we genuinely still have things we need to get done?
The guide offers a brilliant, almost deceptively simple 60-second rhythm to reverse this exact plumbing issue. It refers to this as the panic button whisper. The core logic here is that you cannot think your way out of a physiological hijack. Your logic center is offline, so you can't reason with the panic button.
Right. The CEO isn't in the building.
Exactly. Instead, you have to use your physical body to signal safety. And you do this through a specific type of vibration. All you do is close your lips, ensure your jaw is relaxed, and make a low-frequency, continuous humming sound, exactly like a honeybee.
Wait, just a simple hum, like you're humming a single low note.
I feel like my coworkers might look at me a little funny if I just start buzzing at my desk.
They might, which is why you can do it quietly or step into a hallway or a bathroom stall. But the biology behind why this works is astounding. That specific low-frequency vibration mechanically stimulates your vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the massive central communication highway that runs from your abdomen up through your vocal cords and directly into your brainstem.
Okay, I'm tracking. When you hum, the vibration of your vocal cords physically massages that nerve. This sends a direct, mechanical, bottom-up message to the panic button that says, the predator is gone, The environment is secure. We are safe.
And the guard stands down.
Yes. The moment that threat signal is turned off, the parasympathetic nervous system engages, the blood vessels in your prefrontal cortex dilate, and the vascular shunt reverses. The blood physically flows back to your wise mind, the lights turn back on in the CEO's office, and you can suddenly access your vocabulary and think clearly again, all from 60 seconds of humming.
That is just incredible. You aren't forcing focus. You're literally just manually turning the power back on by speaking the physical language your body understands.
Exactly.
But I want to pivot slightly and talk about how we start our days, too. Because as much as we struggle with that afternoon wall, sometimes that heavy static feeling doesn't politely wait until 4:30 p.m. Sometimes you wake up with it.
Oh, absolutely.
You open your eyes at 6:30 a.m., you haven't even looked at an email yet, but your brain already feels like it's wading through wet cement. You feel exhausted before your feet even hit the floor.
And the guide has a fascinating explanation for that morning heaviness, and it brings us to a biological process that happens while we sleep. It's called the nightly wash cycle. We have this incredible mechanism in our brains called the glymphatic system. You can picture it as a highly specialized biological dishwasher.
A biological dishwasher. I love that visual.
It's very accurate. During the deepest phases of your sleep, the actual glial cells in your brain physically shrink by up to 60%. This creates microscopic empty spaces between the cells. Once that space is created, rhythmic waves of cerebrospinal fluid rush through the brain tissue, physically washing away the neurotoxic waste and metabolic byproducts that build up from a long day of thinking, worrying, and processing information. It is a mechanical flush of cellular trash.
Okay, so if we all have this built-in cleaning cycle, why doesn't mine seem to run some nights? Why do I wake up feeling like the dishes are still dirty, so to speak?
Because, just like a real dishwasher, the glymphatic system is permission-based. It requires a specific all-clear signal from your nervous system before it will turn on. And this is where modern life creates a major problem.
Oh, of course.
If you spend your entire day in a state of what the book calls peripheral vigilance, which means you're constantly scanning for the next crisis, checking your phone every few minutes, tracking everyone's emotional state in your house, you physically break your vagal tone.
Vagal tone.
Yes, your vagal tone is essentially your biological brake pedal. If you ride that brake all day long by staying in a state of low-level anxiety, the brake pads wear out, the pedal breaks, your nervous system gets stuck on high alert, and the volume of your internal alarm is jammed at maximum.
That sounds horribly familiar.
So when you finally collapse into bed and go to sleep, your brain never receives the safety signal. The panic button stays on active guard duty all night long. Because the brain doesn't feel safe, the cells never shrink, the fluid never rushes in, and the dishwasher never runs. You wake up with literal, physical, unprocessed metabolic trash clogging your neural pathways. The book calls this state biological congestion.
That makes so much sense of the reality so many of us face. That heavy, sluggish morning feeling isn't just a bad night's sleep, and it isn't something that can be fixed by just pouring a stronger cup of coffee. My brain is literally full of the cellular exhaust from yesterday. It's sticky and physically congested.
Precisely.
Which really highlights the invisible burden of the modern woman's experience. We're constantly managing an invisible mental load. We're carrying our work schedules, our partner's schedules, remembering that the kids need a specific permission slip signed by Thursday, worrying about a weird tone in an email from a friend.
We live our entire lives in that state of peripheral vigilance.
Constantly scanning, always. And knowing that this vigilance actually breaks the biological brake pedal explains something else that I think we all secretly struggle with. It explains why we are so deeply terrified of silence.
The fear of silence is a massive theme in the guide. It refers to this phenomenon as the vacuum of silence.
Yes, think about how this plays out. We wake up feeling heavy and congested, and what is the very first thing we do? We grab the phone, we turn on a podcast while we make coffee, we put the morning news on in the background while we get dressed. We feel this desperate need for some kind of ambient noise. We tell ourselves we are just gathering information or keeping ourselves entertained, but the reality is we are craving something much deeper. We are craving synthetic safety.
That is exactly what it is. When your brain's architecture has been continuously rewired for constant digital noise, endless input, and peripheral vigilance, quiet actually becomes a terrifying experience.
Because it's too quiet.
Right. Your panic button has been artificially trained to equate a high volume of incoming signal with survival. It believes that as long as information is flowing, the environment is known, and therefore it can anticipate threats.
So it feels safe when there's noise.
Exactly. So when you finally carve out a quiet moment, Let's say you sit down at an empty, quiet desk with a cup of tea to do some deep, uninterrupted work. The sudden lack of digital noise feels like a massive biological threat. The panic button assumes that the communication network has gone down, which in the ancestral wild meant you were isolated from the tribe and a predator could be sneaking up on you. This sudden silence triggers a state of cognitive withdrawal. Your brain essentially hits the panic button precisely because the noise stopped.
That is wild and a bit confronting. The quiet peace that we claim we desperately want, the quiet that we fantasize about on busy days, is actually triggering a survival panic the moment we get it.
It's quite a paradox.
It is. So if our own biology is fighting against the silence, how do we find a rhythm to get past that? How do we build a sanctuary for focus when our brain is screaming that the quiet is dangerous?
The book suggests a really elegant setup called the deep work shield. Because you can't just command your brain to feel safe, you have to actively teach your panic button that silence is not a threat. And you do that through the use of physical boundaries.
Like what kind of boundaries?
You choose one specific, tangible physical anchor and place it on your desk. Maybe it's a smooth river stone, a small potted plant, or even a specific heavy pen. You look at that object and you establish a firm physical rule. Inside this physical space, around this specific object, we are completely safe. You're providing your panic button with a tangible, visual guarantee of security.
I really like the tangibility of that. It's an anchor for the mind. But let's be honest about the messy reality of this.
Yeah.
Even with a nice stone on my desk, the first few minutes of sitting in silence are still going to feel incredibly uncomfortable.
Right.
My brain is still going to itch for distraction.
It is. The friction will absolutely be there. And that is why the second crucial part of this setup is accepting what the guide calls the 20-minute grace period. When you sit down in that quiet space, your brain is going to protest loudly. It is going to demand a quick check of your email, a glance at your phone, anything to bring the noise back.
The cognitive withdrawal.
Exactly. You have to anticipate and expect that protest. You have to recognize it for what it is. Simple cognitive withdrawal. It is a chemical craving, nothing more. If you can simply stay seated in your safe space for 20 minutes without surrendering to the urge to check your phone or open a new tab, a shift happens.
The panic subsides.
Yes. The panic button eventually processes the lack of input and realizes that no predator is actually coming. The threat level drops, the blood returns to the wise mind, the withdrawal symptoms fade, and the cognitive fog finally lifts.
Reframing it as a waiting room completely changes the struggle. It's not that I lack the ability to focus. It's just a 20-minute waiting period while my biology metabolizes its own panic and calms down. I just have to sit through the discomfort.
It's just a wave you ride out.
But speaking of that intense urge to check the phone, we have to unpack the endless scrolling, the absolute compulsion to just swipe and pull to refresh. In popular culture, we all casually joke about dopamine. We talk about it like it's this fun, pleasurable reward molecule, like a little hit of joy we are chasing when we open an app.
And that is one of the most pervasive and damaging myths in our modern understanding of the brain. The guide completely dismantles this idea. Dopamine is not the pleasure molecule.
Really?
It does not make you feel satisfied. It is the molecule of search and anticipation. Its evolutionary purpose is to create an agitated drive that keeps you moving forward, forcing you to look for food, shelter, or safety in a dangerous world where those resources were scarce. It is a persistent underlying biological hum that says, keep looking, keep searching, don't stop. The thing you need is just over the next hill.
Okay, wait, so dopamine isn't the feeling of eating the delicious meal. It's the restless drive that forces you to walk 10 miles through the cold to find the food in the first place.
Right. Yes, that's it. It is the friction of desire, not the piece of reward. Now, imagine taking that ancient hardwired search hardware and dropping it directly into our modern digital environment. The infinite scroll on your smartphone is a dark masterclass in exploiting this exact biological mechanism.
Because there's no end to the scroll.
Exactly. The internet provides a bottomless, frictionless well of novelty. Every single time you swipe your thumb, every time a red notification bubble appears, your brain gets a sharp, entirely artificial spike of dopamine. It thinks you have just discovered a massive trove of survival resources. But biological systems are designed to seek homeostasis. They crave balance.
So what does the brain do?
When your brain senses these massive, unnatural, continuous spikes of dopamine, it panics. It tries to protect the delicate neural tissue from excitotoxicity by aggressively lowering its own baseline. It physically downregulates and shuts off its own dopamine receptors to muffle the overwhelming noise.
That sounds like a protective mechanism that totally backfires.
It backfires spectacularly, creating what the guide calls a severe baseline shift. After just an hour of mindless scrolling on the couch, your internal dopamine baseline has crashed so far below its normal natural level that you are operating in a massive neurochemical deficit. The book refers to this state as the digital hangover.
Oh, and we all know the visceral, hollow feeling of a digital hangover. It's that moment when you finally lock your phone and set it on the coffee table, and suddenly your real life feels agonizingly boring. You look around your living room, you see your partner reading a book, or your kids playing on the rug, or you look at the creative project you wanted to work on, and it almost physically hurts to engage with it.
Because your baseline is crushed.
Right. The normal, beautiful, slow pace of everyday reality cannot possibly compete with the artificial chemical spikes of the screen, so everything real just feels flat, gray, and deeply exhausting.
You feel exhausted because your motivation circuit is functionally bankrupt. You have depleted the molecule of anticipation. And this biological reality ties directly into another incredible concept from the guide, which explains our digital hoarding habits. It calls this phenomenon data obesity and the scarcity default.
Beta obesity?
Think about the way we use our web browsers. Why do we keep 24 different tabs open at the same time? Why do we endlessly save articles, recipes, and videos that we know deep down we will never actually have the time to look at again?
I feel personally attacked right now.
To understand this, we have to look ancestrally. For early humans, discovering new, actionable information was a rare life-saving event. If you learned the location of a new water source or observed a new migration pattern, you survived the season. Because of that, our brains are hard-coded to hoard information as if it were a scarce, vital resource.
Okay, so having all those tabs open across the top of my screen is the modern mental equivalent of our ancestors' bodies storing physical fat to survive a winter famine. We are terrified to close the tab and let the information go because our ancient primitive brain is whispering that we might need that specific data point to survive a coming disaster.
That is the exact mechanism. We are living in a digital world that blasts us with a fire hose of data every second, but our hardware is still stubbornly running a famine survival program. We are starving for deep meaning and connection, but we are absolutely gorging ourselves on shallow data.
The reality of this for so many of us manifests as the great illusion of the Read Later app, or meticulously bookmarking things into neatly labeled little folders. We tell ourselves we are being highly productive and organized.
Well,
But really, moving those 24 chaotic tabs into a nicely named folder doesn't actually reduce the cognitive load weighing on our wise mind.
not at all.
We are essentially just moving the mental fat from the kitchen counter to a different shelf in the pantry. It is still sitting there, taking up space, creating a low-level background hum of obligation. We think we're managing our workflow, but we're really just trying to appease this irrational, primitive fear of missing out on survival data. And the harsh truth is, you simply cannot scroll your way into a sense of completion. It is biologically impossible to reach the end of an infinite feed.
You cannot. You will never feel done by consuming more. To break this deeply ingrained cycle, the book offers two very powerful practical flow adjustments. The first is about creating intentional friction through a rhythm called the 10-minute gap.
The 10-minute gap, how does that work?
Throughout your day, when you are transitioning between tasks, say finishing a meeting and sitting back down at your desk, you will inevitably feel that sudden, intense urge to check your phone. That is the itch of cognitive withdrawal we discussed earlier. The secret here is that you do not fight that urge with willpower, because willpower will lose to dopamine every time.
Right, the gas tank is empty.
Exactly. Instead, you simply pause. You find a stationary, non-digital object in the room, a wall clock, a coffee mug, a picture frame, and you lock your eyes onto it for exactly 60 seconds.
You literally just stare at a coffee mug for a minute.
Yes. By keeping your eyes physically still and denying your brain that immediate frantic hit of visual novelty, you force the dopamine baseline to stabilize. You're preventing the plunge into the digital hangover. You are allowing the chemical wave of the craving to wash over your nervous system without reflexively reacting to it. You are teaching your brain to tolerate the gap.
It's like learning to ride out a craving instead of desperately trying to feed it.
Yeah.
And what about the digital hoarding? How do we deal with the anxiety of the open tabs?
That requires a more decisive rhythm called the tab purge. When you look at your screen and you feel that chaotic, suffocating pressure of too much open data, you take a deep breath and you ruthlessly close every single window until exactly 3 tabs remain open.
Just 3.
Just the 3 specific tabs you absolutely need for the single task you are doing right in this very moment. You do not save the others to a folder, you do not bookmark them, you permanently close them. And as you do it, you say out loud to yourself, I have enough information to act.
I can feel the profound sense of empowerment in that. Just hearing you describe it, saying the phrase, I have enough information to act, isn't just a productivity trick. It is setting a firm, compassionate boundary. It is speaking directly to your inner hoarder and saying, the famine is over, we are safe, we have enough, now let's actually get to work.
It's a powerful reset.
It really is. And that realization naturally brings us to the next major insight from the guide, how we actually architect our workday once the distractions are cleared. Because once we close the tabs and put the phone away, we still have to sit there and do the actual work. And the problem is, modern corporate culture has sold us a massive, biologically impossible lie about how our brains handle tasks. And that is the pervasive myth of multitasking.
It is a complete fabrication. The guide shatters the multitasking myth beautifully, using hard neurological evidence. Because of our technology, we like to flatter ourselves by thinking we are parallel processors, capable of juggling 10 complex cognitive threads at the exact same time. But the neuroscience proves that the wise mind, the CEO we discussed earlier, is a strict, uncompromising serial processor. It can only handle one single complex thought thread at a time. Period.
Not 2.
Not 2. To visualize this, think of your active working memory as a physical wooden shelf in your brain. That processing shelf has very rigid, finite dimensions. For the average human, it can only hold about 5 to 7 chunks of data at any given millisecond.
Okay, so if I'm trying to write an important report, but I also have 3 unread emails visible on my second monitor, a lingering thought about what I need to pull out of the freezer for dinner, and a Slack message from a coworker that I haven't replied to. Every single one of those unresolved items is taking up physical space on that tiny wooden shelf.
Exactly. They're squatting on your cognitive real estate. And when you try to multitask, when you jump from the report to the Slack message and back with, you aren't actually processing them simultaneously. Your brain is rapidly toggling its spotlight of attention back and forth.
Which burns fuel.
And this brings us to what might be the most staggering, sobering fact in the entire guide, the switching cost. Every single time you interrupt a state of deep work to check a notification, answer a quick question, or glance at an unrelated email, it takes your brain an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to return to that original state of deep, immersive focus.
I really want that number to sink in for a second. 23 minutes and 15 seconds just to recover from a single interruption. That is devastating to realize. If you are someone who habitually checks your phone or glances at your inbox every 10 or 15 minutes, you are mathematically preventing yourself from ever reaching a state of deep focus. You're spending your entire waking day in what the book describes as a state of cognitive reload.
You are living your life in a perpetual state of startup. Imagine turning your computer completely off and booting it back up every 10 minutes. The machine spends all its energy just loading the operating system and never actually runs the programs. Your brain is constantly burning massive amounts of its limited metabolic fuel, just trying to remember where it was and re-find its place. This is why your energy battery is completely drained by noon, even if you feel like you haven't accomplished anything difficult.
That makes so much sense.
And it is not just our digital devices causing these interruptions. The guide delves deeply into the concept of public noise. Think about the modern open-plan office or trying to work in a bustling, trendy coffee shop. We convince ourselves that we are thriving in a collaborative, vibrant environment, but our ancient biology violently disagrees.
Right, because that concept of peripheral vigilance we unpacked earlier, our brains are tracking the room.
Precisely. To your wise mind, a coworker walking quickly past your desk toward the printer is just a colleague doing their job. But to your amygdala, that sudden movement in your peripheral vision registers with the exact same biological alarm as a predator moving rapidly through the tall grass in the ancestral savanna.
So the guard is on high alert.
Your brain is forced to spend precious metabolic energy analyzing that movement, calculating the trajectory, and confirming that you aren't about to be attacked. This ambient tracking keeps your nervous system in a perpetual yellow light state of stress, making deep, sustained work mechanically impossible.
This translates so perfectly and painfully to that specific feeling of logging off at 5:00 p.m., looking back at your day and seeing nothing but a chaotic trail of incomplete cycles. You know the feeling intimately. You have 3 half-written emails sitting in your drafts folder, a budget spreadsheet that is only formatted halfway, and a slide deck that is missing its conclusion. You reach the end of the day, and you are bone-tired. Your brain aches.
The switching cost catches up.
And we usually punish ourselves for this. We think it's because we have too much to do, or we assume we just aren't as capable as our peers. But the reality is, it is because we are paying the severe, compounding biological penalty of constantly shifting gears. We have to fundamentally shift our perspective and realize that focus isn't some magical, elusive gift bestowed upon the highly disciplined. Focus is a structural boundary we must actively set around our time.
It is an architectural boundary, and to help build that protective boundary, the guide offers a highly effective, streamlined setup called the 1.1.1 focus formula. It is specifically designed to eliminate the switching cost entirely and send a clear signal of safety to your wise mind so the CEO can actually do their job.
Let's break that formula down for a Tuesday morning. What are the 3 ones?
The first one stands for one single task. When you sit down to work, you do not have 3 priorities, you do not have a multifaceted objective, you choose one single granular task. This immediately eliminates the exhausting background noise of competing objectives fighting for space on the processing shelves.
Okay, one task. What's next?
The second one stands for Nash's one digital window. You close every other application. You maximize the single window you need to full screen. You physically remove the digital triggers that tempt your brain into context switching.
Love that. And the third?
And the final one, which is arguably the most important, is one clear definition of what done actually looks like.
That last one is the absolute game changer for me.
Yeah.
Defining what done looks like before you even start. Because if your goal is just vaguely defined as work on the Key 3 presentation, there is no finish line. Your brain just drifts endlessly in this ambiguous sea of effort. You get tired, you stop, and you end up with yet another incomplete cycle to feel guilty about. But if you define done as, I will write the 3 bullet points for the revenue slide, you've given your brain a concrete destination. It knows when it can safely power down.
Absolutely. Giving the brain a clear, achievable destination stops the metabolic bleed. But here's where the guide takes a profoundly empathetic and incredible turn. It acknowledges a truth that the productivity industry almost entirely ignores. It points out that even with the most perfect boundaries, the cleanest desk, and the best focus formulas, our brains are not silicon machines. They are sensitive, biological organisms subject to complex internal rhythms. And the most overlooked rhythm of all is our internal weather.
Yes. This specific section of the book is so deeply validating, especially for women.
We have been intensely conditioned by industrial culture to treat our minds as static, unchanging hardware that should seamlessly produce the exact same level of output, enthusiasm, and focus every single day of the month. But the biological reality is that the brain operates within a highly dynamic, constantly shifting hormonal landscape. The guide refers to this as the internal season.
Our internal
Yes. Your cognitive capacity naturally fluctuates based on the rise and fall of hormones, particularly estrogen and progesterone. The entire corporate world is built on a rigid summer baseline, an expectation of high energy, highly verbal, robust executive function, and extroverted collaboration every day. But our bodies inevitably cyclically shift into what the book calls a winter phase.
which translates to the late luteal phase of the hormonal cycle right before menstruation begins.
Exactly. During this winter phase, there is a massive systemic biological shift occurring. Specifically, the sensitivity of the GABA receptors in your brain drops significantly. Now, GABA is your brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. You can think of it as your brain's biological mute button. Its job is to filter out all the low-priority, annoying background noise so your wise mind can focus purely on the signal.
Okay, so what happens when we hit winter?
When you enter the winter phase and those receptors lose sensitivity, that mute button essentially breaks. Suddenly, all the background noise floods the system. Every small sound in the house, every minor worry about the future, every piece of sensory data comes in at absolute maximum volume.
Applying this biological reality to our daily lives is profound. It exposes the extreme danger of what we can call summer logic. We expect ourselves to have that high-output, extroverted, conquering-the-world energy every single day. We judge our worth based on our summer days.
And we punish ourselves for the winter days.
But when you blindly apply summer logic to a winter brain, you cause a massive system crash. You sit down at your desk with a broken mute button, trying to do deep, complex, strategic work. You inevitably lose your train of thought mid-sentence because the ambient noise is too loud. And immediately, what is our default reaction? We feel incredibly guilty. We think we are failing at our jobs. We think we are falling behind.
But you aren't failing at all. Your biological mute button is just temporarily offline for maintenance. And it is not just our hormonal weather that causes this overwhelming internal noise. The guide also dives into something deeply fascinating and somewhat controversial about where our anxiety actually comes from. It introduces the concepts of epigenetic defaults and ghost scripts.
The concept of ghost scripts completely blew my mind when I read it. It feels like science fiction, but it's real biology.
It is an incredibly powerful framework for understanding ourselves. The core idea is that our cognitive architecture, the specific automatic way we process threats, anxiety, and fear, is largely inherited. You aren't just thinking your own original thoughts, you are running an operating system that was passed down through your lineage.
Passed down from our ancestors.
Yes. If your recent ancestors survived a high-threat environment, famine, war, extreme poverty, or social persecution, their biology adapted. Their baseline became permanently calibrated for hypervigilance to keep them alive. And through epigenetic markers, they passed that hypervigilant baseline down to you. So when you feel a sudden, irrational spike of panic over a minor email typo, you are running ghost scripts of inadequacy or terror that you didn't even write.
Just pause and let that sink in. That sudden, sharp, deeply critical and anxious voice in your head. The one telling you that you aren't good enough, that you are going to be fired, or that disaster is right around the corner. That might not even be your voice. It might literally be your grandmother's survival anxiety or your father's deep-seated fear of failure executing automatically on physical hardware that you did not choose.
That is the reality of it.
Wow.
You are experiencing the echoes of their survival. And the critical error we almost all make in modern therapy and self-improvement is trying to actively argue with that inner voice. We try to debate the anxiety.
Which doesn't work.
No, because the guide explains that when you argue with a ghost script, you are actively engaging it. And in the rules of neuroscience, engagement is reinforcement. Every single time you try to logic your way out of that inherited anxiety, you are laying down myelin, a fatty insulating sheath around those specific neurons in your brain. You are building a thicker, faster neural pathway for the anxiety to travel on.
Making us stronger.
The book calls this process creating neural grit. By fighting the thought, you are taking a fleeting inherited ghost and turning it into a permanent paved superhighway in your own mind.
So if arguing with the anxiety just makes it stronger, how do we handle this? How do we adjust our daily flow when the internal weather is stormy, the mute button is broken, and the ghosts are talking loudly?
The first major adjustment is implementing a hormonal audit. On those days when you wake up and the static is high, when you physically feel that heavy winter brain and you recognize that your GABA mute button is offline, you must ruthlessly stop applying summer logic. You look at your to-do list and you move your deep, demanding strategic work to another day. You pivot.
You change the plan.
You focus your day entirely on low-energy administrative maintenance tasks. You clear out your inbox, you organize your digital files, you pay the bills, you do the laundry. And you do this without an ounce of guilt, knowing that you are simply elegantly aligning your workflow with your actual biological capacity for that specific day.
You stop fighting the weather and just dress for it appropriately.
Exactly. And for dealing with the ghost scripts, the guide offers a brilliant psychological rhythm called the third-person label. When that inner critic flares up and tells you that you are an imposter, you do not argue with it. You do not try to prove it wrong. Instead, you create immediate cognitive distance by identifying the thought in the third person.
Right, so instead of internalizing it and saying, I am a fraud, I'm going to fail this project, I would take a breath and say, Maya is having a thought that she is going to fail.
Yes. The moment you use your own name to describe the experience, a remarkable neurological shift happens. You move the brain's activity away from the emotional amygdala and back into the observational prefrontal cortex. You shift the terrifying thought from being an absolute, undeniable reality into being just a neutral, passing piece of data. You step completely outside of the ghost script and simply observe it playing out, which completely starves the neural pathway of the emotional fuel it needs to build that dangerous neural grit.
That brings such a profound sense of peace, just observing the thought instead of becoming it. Now, I want to pivot as we look toward the end of our conversation because we need to talk about how we actually land the plane. We have talked extensively about the architecture of the workday, the underlying biology, and the internal noise, but absolutely none of this matters if we do not have a reliable rhythm to gently close out our day and prepare the body for the next.
It's the most crucial part.
The guide gives us a beautiful, practical application for this, something every listener can start doing this very weekend. It's a Saturday setup, a truly restorative gift for your tired mind, not just another chore to add to your already overloaded to-do list.
And this rhythm is so crucial because it directly addresses the phenomenon of the end-of-day collapse. We need to talk about the sunset dimming rhythm, and in doing so, we have to bust the pervasive myth of the night owl.
Oh, the night owl badge of honor.
So many high-achieving people wear the night owl badge with a sense of pride. They claim they do their absolute best, most creative work at 1 a.m. when the house is quiet. But the guide reveals the harsh biological truth of what is really happening at that hour. That late-night wired, buzzing feeling, that compulsion to do mindless scrolling or frantic, low-level busy work. It is not creative genius. It is simply your brain seeking the absolute cheapest, most accessible fuel source available because your wise mind is completely bankrupt and your panic button has taken over the steering wheel.
We convince ourselves we are being dedicated and productive, but we are really just running our nervous system on the toxic fumes of our own panic.
You are operating in a state of chronic system abuse. To break that cycle, and to allow the brain's nightly wash cycle, that vital glymphatic flush, to actually happen, you have to manually initiate the sunset dimming rhythm. The setup is simple but non-negotiable. 1 full hour before you intend to go to sleep, you physically dim the environment around you. You turn off the overhead lights and switch to low, warm lamps. And most importantly, you physically remove the smartphone from the bedroom entirely.
The classic out of sight, out of mind rule, literally removing the temptation.
Yes, but it goes deeper than temptation. To your amygdala, the mere physical presence of the glowing screen on your nightstand registers as a potential threat signal. It is an open portal to the unpredictable outside world. It prevents the deep relaxation required for the biological dishwasher to start.
Because the guard won't sleep if the door is open.
Exactly. Once the environment is dim, you sit down and perform the mental dump. You take a physical paper notebook and a pen, and you write down every single open loop in your mind, every unfinished task, every lingering worry about tomorrow, every unreturned email.
Because if you don't externalize those thoughts and put them on physical paper, your brain is forced to stay on active guard duty all night long just trying to remember them. By writing it down, you are giving the panic button formal, documented permission to stand down. You are essentially telling your biology, I have captured the threats, the perimeter is secure, you can go to sleep. That is the exact signal that allows the dishwasher to finally turn on and clear out the congestion.
Beautifully put. And finally, the guide offers one last tool for those moments during the actual day, when the overwhelm hits so hard that you feel completely frozen, when you experience a total executive lockout and you can't even remember what you were supposed to be doing. It offers the 60-second reboot. This is your biological emergency manual override.
Walk us through the physical steps of that reboot.
When you feel that absolute freeze, the first rule is you do not try to think your way out of it. Logic is offline. You have to use your body. Step 1, you stand up, hold your hands out, and physically shake your hands vigorously for 10 to 15 seconds, almost exactly like you are trying to shake freezing water off your fingers. This acts as a massive somatic pattern interrupt. It physically breaks the freeze state of your nervous system and discharges that pent-up, frantic survival energy.
You literally shake it off. I love how primal that is.
Step 2. Once you stop shaking, you say out loud in a calm, firm voice, "That was then. This is now." This serves as an auditory close command. It tells your biological basement that whatever specific threat triggered the freeze state is definitively over. The timeline has moved forward. And step 3, you take one single deep, deliberate breath in through your nose and exhale slowly. That is it. Shake, declare, breathe. You have manually cycled the power on your cognitive hardware and rebooted the system.
Shake the hands. Declare the shift. Take the breath. It is so remarkably simple, yet it speaks the exact, literal physical language our nervous system actually understands. We spend so much of our lives agonizing, trying to logic our way out of biological panic, judging ourselves for our lack of willpower. And this guide just gently hands us the keys to work with the magnificent machine exactly as it was built.
It truly does. And if we zoom out and connect all of this to the bigger picture of our lives, it leads to a profound realization about what the book calls the legacy of thought. The overarching message here is that building a sanctuary in your own mind, learning to clear the static, honoring your internal seasons, closing the digital tabs, and calming your panic button is not just some clever productivity hack to make you a better employee. It is not just about getting more emails sent before 5:00 p.m.
No, it is so much bigger and more important than that. When you do this deep internal work, when you actually take the time to heal your own cognitive architecture, you stop leaking that frantic, nervous panic onto everyone else around you. You stop bleeding your stress and your inherited ghost scripts onto your partner, your team, and most importantly, your children. You transition from being a chaotic reactor to the world to being a grounded biological anchor of safety for every single person in your life. You get to finally finish the psychological war that your ancestors started, and you get to lay down a permanent foundation of peace. That is the most profound, lasting gift you can possibly offer to your future.
If you want to dive deeper into these ideas, the full guide is available on Amazon. You can find the link in our bio. It's a perfect deep dive for a quiet afternoon. Thanks for listening to FM Talks.